is the story of a lost neighborhood and of its people who did not want to go.
I don't want no money. I want my home. The old man is old. See how the old man is old? And I'm old. That's enough. I don't want to get out. I said to my two daughters, they don't want to get out too, because they spend a lot of money. Plenty of money they spend in this place. We not get out to nobody. Never.
Hi, welcome to the West End Video Newsletter. Tonight we're going to talk about an old West End institution, the Elizabeth Peabody House. It was an old-line West End institution until they tore the West End down and the Peabody House down, and then it moved to Somerville, and it's been here in Somerville for about 35 or 40 years, as long as I've been here anyway. I moved here right after they tore the West End down, and the Peabody House was here when I came. And tonight I want to introduce you. We have Anne-Marie Carpenter, Carolyn Canina, and Theresa Imbornone. Anne-Marie is the executive director of the Peabody House. You are the director of child services, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And Theresa is the vice president of the house. And all fine people who are putting a lot of time and effort into a worthwhile endeavor. I guess we'll start off with this. As you know, the old West End, like I said at the beginning, was, you know, a West End institution. And I know Theresa was an old West Ender. And can you give us a little bit of a history of the West End, from your personal point of view? We haven't done the show before, but from your personal point of view, just give us a little history, your viewpoint.
Of the West End?
Of the West End and the Peabody House. The Peabody House mainly. How you got involved in...
Well, I moved there as a very youngster, and I lived there about 18 years, to my teen years. I made so many good friends. Unfortunately, everyone went their own way, you know, in the 50s and in the 60s, anticipating the downfall of the West End. But it was just one big family, as I remember it. Everybody was actually in the same boat, poor,
Yeah, well, that's for
as
sure.
you remember that.
At least my family was.
Right. And, you know, there weren't any such thing as locked doors.
Right.
Everybody, as you know, you're in agreement at this, you know,
Right.
everybody knew the same people, and, you know, everybody visited the same shops.
Right, and the culture was pretty much the same.
Very much.
Yeah.
It was a very mixed, so many Polish people, Italians, Jewish. I mean, we just, there was no such thing as racism or, you know, everybody
Got along. More or less got along,
and,
yeah.
you know, I remember my mom sending me on the fire escape, you know, giving some Italian food to Jewish family.
Well, that's
But
good.
I went at a very early age. My dad died when I was 16 months old, so, you know, other than the social activity, everything was at the Peabody House, everything. And there were social workers, as you know, there, and that would help folks out like my mom, and that's how I got to Camp Gannett. My mom didn't have any money, but...
They had scholarships for
Right.
some people.
Right. We had cooking classes there. We had plays that we were in. I was Sleeping Water and some play, and I mean, you know, it was a marvelous theater, as you remember.
Yeah, it was beautiful theater. Full size, small but full size. Yeah.
Right. It's just, you know, when I think of the West End, it's the Peabody House.
Well, the West End House was there too, but the West End House was basically a boys' club. And the only time girls got into the West End House was when they had dances on Friday nights. So that was basically the difference. I belonged to the West End House for a very short time, I think 2 years, but most of it was spent over at the Peabody House because there was a lot of different activities. West End House was mainly athletics. Do you remember the early years of the West End of the Peabody House? The old line Yankees the Brahmins were very instrumental in starting it, and they came up with a lot of the early, what we would call feminist sociological type programs. You know, Milk for Working Mothers, I forgot a whole host of other things. So I guess, So much for history.
Well, the agency it's over 100 years old, and while none of us would remember that, we know it as its history. And there were those programs was one of the first stations for pasteurized milk.
That's right.
And moved out of the West End and into Somerville in the 50s, is that right?
About 58, I believe,
In the 50s, and had a couple of different homes here in Somerville before
Right.
landing on Broadway.
Right, they started an old bank, I think, at one point on Broadway, and then they moved on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us what a settlement house is?
Settlement house. Well, it is the first.
Because that's what we keep saying, it's settlement
Absolutely.
house, settlement house.
It is the first of many. A lot of programs have grown up and out of settlement houses. Settlement houses started in this country in the mid-1800s. The first ones in the world, or the first one in the world, was in England, Toynbee Hall. And this country adopted the philosophy of the settlement movement, which was to move into impoverished communities and to assist the working poor. And settlements started, as ours specifically, was the first kindergarten in America. And the juvenile courts in America grew up and out of settlement houses. So it does have a rich history in that way.
Oh, well, I guess this is a question. Looking forward, what are the hopes of the Elizabeth Peabody Houses Board over the next several years? Do you guys have anything that are ready to?
I one day would like to see another building and enhance our programs. Anne Marie's doing a wonderful job. We're so happy. And, I think there's a lot more that we can do.
How about anything else? Or?
Well, I began in March of I was going to say this year, of 2001.
Yeah.
And a lot of what was discussed in interviews and over these last few months working with board and with Carolyn and our staff was to look at all of our sites. We have 5 different sites in Somerville and 30 acres in Sharon. So one of the goals over the next few years is to look and assess all of those sites and do the renovations that are necessary. We have 2 different kindergartens. We're looking to have one of them accredited by the National Association for the Education of Young Children. We're looking at all of our benefit packages, employment packages, so that we might be able to recruit and retain highly qualified staff, which we have now and want to continue to be able to do that. And Theresa can speak to board development, but we've been very lucky in the last several months to have several mostly Somerville folks who are interested in joining our board.
That's good.
And to bring the legal expertise and the banking expertise and the facilities expertise that the agency needs to enhance and expand programs.
It is a fine Somerville agency, and it should enhance the city of Somerville quite a bit.
And what we should say, really, it would include the programs that we have right now. We have an infant program, a toddler program. As I mentioned, there are 2 preschools. We have school-age programs for children 5 through 13 years old. We serve all of these children year-round, but that 5 to 13-year-old group go down to our Camp Gannett in Sharon. We do, it's both a day and an overnight camp. It's day camp for our school-age children and families, many of whom have returned year after year, and like yourselves, went there yourselves as children. So we're very fortunate to have folks who keep coming back and have it as their summer experience for their children.
I have very fond memories of the camp, especially I used to like to go at night, just about twilight, and sit down when they used to call it the fishing hole. It used to be so peaceful down there. You could sit down and just, it was like, the rest of the world was somewhere else, and you could just sit there, and it was fun. I have a lot of good memories about Camp Gannett. I went there about 5 or 6 years, I forgot how many. Then I grew up to become a teenager, and that became...
Well, we're looking to expand our program so that we might additionally serve teenagers. We do have senior services, and we also house or provide a rental opportunity to the Somerville Cooperative Theater. So there was a theater in the original Elizabeth Peabody House, and to this day continues to be part of our our
Right.
scope of direct services. But a lot of what happens in settlement houses, and you folks were telling the story about growing up, really has to do with the advocacy and the neighbors helping neighbors.
That's right.
And while that may not be listed as a direct service, it's helping both immigrants and residents of the neighborhoods work their way through a variety of systems, whether they're the educational system or housing, have housing issues, or have aging parents and need assistance with that. So we do work with families from infancy through senior years.
Yeah, they've had I guess the child care programs going there for quite a while, at least since I got involved at the Peabody House. That was around 1984. And they were, matter of fact, they were doing that for quite a while, and it seemed like it was working quite well. I really haven't been all that involved in the Peabody House in the last couple of years, so I can't really state, from whatever position. I can just guess,
Right. Well,
But,
Carolyn, having been there 10 years and a
Right.
position in large part created, given the expansion of services and the number of children and families we serve, can speak to.
Well, Carolyn, you're head of that whole department, right?
Of the Director of Child Care,
Right.
yes.
Could you tell us how that works and how it, what you do?
I primarily supervise the 5 programs that we have, work with staff, work with parents, work with the children, and do a lot of networking in the community with other organizations, the Somerville Community Partnership for Children, the Youth Network, the School Age Advisory Council, and we work to inform the community of what services are available to families,
Right.
what the needs are for families, and what the needs are for programs, so that we can enrich our programs and give the families what they're looking for.
What do you think are the greatest strengths of the Elizabeth Peabody House and its programs?
I think that the greatest strengths are the staff's dedication. The staff work very hard to provide quality care, and they care about each individual child and family.
And how do you think this benefits the whole of Somerville, I guess?
We have children that started with us at 3 months, and they're 12 years old, and they're still with us today. We form long relationships with families. We care for siblings, we care for cousins and step families. So we really take care of the whole family for a lot of years.
As the executive director of this organization, and what do you think about the strengths and weaknesses of the Elizabeth Peabody House?
Well, having started it by meeting the board of directors and the staff, it struck me right away how long people had stayed with an organization, and in these times where turnover is so great and retaining good people is so difficult, there's something very, very special about this agency that would have board members willing to volunteer lots of time to management issues, and staff who work well beyond any sort of traditional 40-hour work week. So it definitely lies in the strengths of the folks who have been there for a very long time. And in a 100-year history, I think we really, not only the history of the agency, but the history of settlement houses in general. I do work with the Massachusetts Association of Settlement Houses. There's a national association and an international. So when we begin to tell our story that includes Hull House in Chicago and Jane Addams, a Nobel Peace Prize winner, and how many programs have been started to attend to unmet needs. And I'd say that's one of the things that really distinguishes settlement houses from other very good social service agencies, is that we're obligated to attend to unmet needs in the community. So I'd say that those are some of the major strengths. We have a lot of we're very fortunate to have space to do our work. That comes with the responsibility of upkeep and the question of who fixes one's roof. But we're very fortunate to have the sites that we have here in Somerville and the gift of Camp Gannett.
That brings us to a point on fundraising. How is the fundraising going, or if it's
as you know, especially given the effects of September 11th and the monies that understandably are diverted to other very necessary causes, it makes the challenge of fundraising that much more challenging in this year and in the next. We have a very significant fundraising objective each year, so that given that 90% of our program participants are low to very low income, there's a lot of monies that needs to be raised to keep doing the work that we do. But I did have the very good fortune to get connected with the fundraisers and grant writers organization here in Somerville within a few weeks of starting, and was able to bring someone on part-time who is doing grant writing and for our organization and developing strategies for special events and other types of income-producing opportunities. We have been primarily focused on trying to get new monies for our buildings and to do planning for our programs. And in December, we had some good news on both of those fronts from different foundations agreeing to fund us in some of those areas.
Well, grants are always fun. Is there any way our audience could help you?
Well, absolutely. We do have, and will continue to have, special events. We have in November of each year what has been called a turkey shoot, and I think I'd let Theresa speak a little bit to what that is about, but I'd suggest to anybody interested in helping us around fundraising that whether it's special events or letter writing campaigns, there's lots of volunteer opportunities to help us in this area.
Well, could you give the address of the Elizabeth Peabody House and the phone number?
Absolutely. We're at 277 Broadway, and the phone number is 623-5510 in 617.
And that's in Somerville. And if anybody out there feels that watching this from the Old West End feels that they have any obligation or any ties to the old house, the Peabody House, if you would feel like giving either time or some kind of monetary donations, I'm sure the Peabody House would be more than willing to take it. As a matter of fact, I'd like to see you come there. Why don't you stop in and say hello and smooze a little bit?
Absolutely. We have events that just to be our guests, we would very much enjoy that. We have an annual meeting or event, cookout at Camp Gannett for folks who grew up together in the West End primarily, but a lot of our families who are in current programs are beginning to join in on that event. So we'd love to see folks at our event.
That's been running about 18 years now.
Yeah.
Because it's been running about...
The Amy Lowell in the Blackstone Apartments.
Right.
We, Senator Travellini is nice enough to donate a bus, and we bus them up for the day, and they have a very nice time.
It might be a good idea to invite him up this year, you know?
Well,
maybe, you know, if he's doing
very
that.
good friends with his secretary, we might.
Yeah, it just might be a good idea to
extend an invitation to him.
Matter of fact, there's always a lot of people up there, and they're from all over. I know Bob is just East Boston, Cambridge, and Boston. I forgot exactly, Charlestown, I think. But you know, it might be a good idea. He's always been. He's been a nice guy. I've had dealings with him in the past, and he's a pretty good person. So I've been. What else does the board think about? You know, these type of. I remember at one point the board put together. What do you call it? A square dance.
Oh yes.
And they had a hayride.
We did.
And they had a whole host of other things.
We've also had the pops, but then attendance does fall off. And we're hoping to eventually have some of these events and have them annually every year. That's what we want to really build up. So.
And you try to keep them approximately in the same time.
Right.
So that somebody can mark their calendar and say, you know, gee, I have to go there. Like I say, well, that's what Camp Gannett is.
Right.
The picnic it used to be the third. It was the third Sunday
of every... end of June.
Yeah, of every June.
And now this is the second year we've had the turkey shoot, and hopefully maybe we will have a Valentine's dance or something to that effect. And
they always did for a couple of years. They had, and then it stopped.
Yeah.
And I don't know what happened. Like I said, I sort of got away. I also had 5 bypasses in between all of this.
Keep you busy.
a lot of stuff got shaken out, but I've always had a soft spot for the Peabody House. I still do. I like doing the show with the Peabody House every year.
And you'll come by and visit the Peabody House.
Of course I will.
Okay.
Used to be there. You used to come by quite often. I used to stop by just about once a month anyway. But some things change, and hopefully I'll be doing that again. It's getting tougher and tougher because it's getting harder and harder to run the newsletter and the rest of it. It's not easy being a one-man show, and it gets tough. And I don't say that, because I want to say it, but but it just gets harder and harder. I don't have as much free time as I used to have. Well, is there anything else in the Peabody House you'd like to talk about? How about daycare?
All of our programs are full.
That's
We're very soon we'll be expanding our infant toddler program to accommodate about 7 more children because there's a huge need in Somerville for infant toddler care. We're totally fully staffed, which is absolutely wonderful.
Yep.
Well, let me end saying that I'm very proud to be affiliated with the Peabody House. And we are most grateful to Anne Marie. I can't say enough.
Yeah.
And Carolyn does a great job.
Well, Anne-Marie, this is the first time I've seen her face to face, and I'm glad because she's a very interesting person. I talked to her on the phone for about 20 minutes the other day, and it was interesting.
Thank you. I learned from you as well.
Well, I don't know about that, but the Peabody House is like I said this before, a fine old institution, and when I harken back to my days in there, and we were playing basketball, okay, and a whole host of other things. It kept us off the streets. Okay, and it was a type of organization. I think that's the difference between what it is today and what it was then. Okay, in those days, if you stood in the streets long enough, right, you eventually get yourself in trouble somehow. Okay, and it may not have been the kind of trouble that you have today. Okay, drugs and everything. It may have been a little bit of mischief that you got into, but in those days, if you spat in the street, they would pick you up and drag you in and throw you in a cell. And might give you a few licks on top of it. Nowadays, it's a whole different story, but nowadays kids have the kind of problems, okay, that we never had to face. I mean,
we had a tremendous amount of children, tremendous amount. I mean, we were condensed in 10 minutes. So, I mean, we did very well for the number of
Yeah, the Peabody House was, like you say, they started off, I remember they had a science room. I remember fencing classes. Tommy Grubb used to give boxing lessons. I mean, I didn't do a lot of girl things, so
and we
won't mention any masculine things.
and we'll note Leonard Nimoy got a start there.
Yeah, I'd like, the theater was a whole different thing. That to me was totally something that was totally new to me, and I think if I hadn't toured the West End down at that time, I may have, because I was just getting interested in it and moving in that way. I was like doing, behind stage, and putting gels on lights and raising curtains and doing all that stuff, and then it just sort of fell apart because they tore the whole neighborhood down. And it would have been nice if they had. I think the biggest thing was the Peabody House versus the West End House is the West End House went out and built a whole new, when they left the West End, they built a whole new building to house what they want. They have a swimming pool, they have whatever. Whereas Peabody House left, and they had a fair-sized endowment when they left the West End. I think it was $100,000. Now, $100,000 today is, spit in the bucket, but in those days, it was a lot of money. People were working for like $20 a week, so that was quite a bit of money. I think where they made the mistake was not going out here, finding some place where they could put up a building that would suit their needs, instead of trying to work out of these small little places, and probably didn't help.
Well, the house today at 275 Broadway is is quite a big building, and as I said, does have a theater in it. We're very fortunate right now to have members of that theater very interested in working directly with Elizabeth Peabody House programs in doing performing arts and teaching children the various aspects of, and the technical aspects of theater. So we hope to
Yeah, it's, the theater was, matter of fact, they just had an article. There was a former West Ender, Frank Storis. They just had an article, I think it was in the Globe, and they were talking about, because the rents were going up and everything, he was being forced out of his studio somewhere downtown. He was looking for a new one. And, you know, now you have to pay for that stuff. And like in the Peabody House, you could go learn all that stuff, okay, as part of the, you know, of what you were doing, your play or whatever you want to call it. The Mr. Roberts that I was in, there was a play, Mr. Roberts. It was put on by the Harvard Theater. And they were all professional actors that came in the show, and you worked around them, and you learned how it's, you know, actors acted and did work, and you learned a little bit about the makeup and what went on, stage presence, and that would have today, if they put that into the theater, okay, and they try to get more kids in there, and have the kids themselves put on some kind of productions, and maybe, I don't know if they do it or not.
That's where we're going next.
Yeah.
I think they have done that over the years, but we're putting together formal programming so that children will have the opportunity to learn the parts and end with a production.
Yeah, and it was, like I say, the working with the gels and the, you know, setting up the stage and the stage presence. That's all, you learn a lot just by osmosis when you hang around that type of environment, and it works well. But I guess we're getting fairly close to the end. Is there any last words you'd like to say about the Peabody House?
Well, I think it's fair to thank good friends that have of the house over many, many years. The supporters, including the United Way and the mayor's office and the various programs and funders that we work collaboratively with in developing new programs. We have some very good long-term friends, counting you among them.
Oh,
Thank
okay.
you very much.
Would you like to say anything in parting, or?
No, thank you.
Okay. Teresa?
I think I have said it all.
You've said it all. Well, I
But
guess...
I appreciate the opportunity that you've given us tonight.
Well, it's like I say, I like to do something for the Peabody House. I used to do the show once a year. I'd like to continue doing it once a year.
Thank you.
We'd be delighted.
I think you deserve it, number one.